The Pacific Group.
Thank you. Chris, alcoholic. I first want to thank the committee for asking me to come on up here and share a little bit of my life with all of you. It's an honor and a privilege to be asked to participate in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, let me give you some statistics so you have a better base to judge me from. 62 years old, 36 years sober. My sponsor is Tom Bouchard, and he's been my sponsor for almost 30 years now. Born and raised in Los Angeles and a member of the Pacific Group. So there you have it. That is the basis of my sobriety. And from that, everything comes after. And the beautiful thing about, getting sober in Los Angeles, I don't know if you guys have them here in Toronto, but in LA, we have these things called slippers. And I am what you call a slipper. And that means a guy who just cannot stay sober, no matter what. And for whatever reason, when I first started coming here, Alcoholics Anonymous, back in 1983, I came to meetings like this, and I saw people like you. And you know what I saw back in 1983? I saw a room full of loser alcoholics. I mean, look at you people, for God's sakes. I mean, you're white, you're black, you're Mexican. Oh my God, it was just crazy. Back in 1983, I didn't see any Japanese people here. So in my mind, I thought, you know what? You people don't have willpower. And you're talking about a disease called alcoholism. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? I wish it was that simple. I really do. But I'm a thinker. And I think deep thoughts. And this whole disease concept was just way too simplistic for me. And I need to be talking about deep stuff like culture, tradition, pride. Back then, what I was doing was I was building a wall between me and you. Now I'm different than you. And as long as I'm different than you, I can't have what you're trying to give me. And I gotta go. And I leave. And as I'm walking out the door, you say, "Hey, Chris, you keep coming back." I say, yeah, I heard that before. No, Chris, you keep coming back even if you're still drinking and using. You keep coming. I thought, really? I don't know about you, but that got my attention. I thought, you want me to keep coming here, even if I'm still drinking and using? You said yes. So I test you. I'm coming to meetings loaded out of my mind. Coming up to the podium, taking chips, sharing about some spiritual experience I had in some $12 a night motel with a crack pipe in one hand and a half a pint in another. And you keep coming back, Chris. And you know what? I did that for almost 5 years. And never, ever once did you say, "Hey, Chris, you can't come here no more. We can't have your kind." If there's anybody out here this evening, a slipper, just like me, somebody that just struggles just a little bit more, I urge you, I beg you, you keep coming back. Keep coming back. Because an old timer told me once, "Chris, you quit coming to AA and the game is over." And thank God, God gave me enough grace to continue to keep coming here. I started my drinking and using career when I was about 12 years old. I remember my first drink. It was a Mai Tai. and it came in a little black can. I don't know if you guys got them up here, but you shake it up and you pop the top like a soda and you're ready to drink. And so one day, I had one of these things, and I remember, I didn't like the way it smelled. I didn't like the way it tasted. But boy, oh boy, halfway through that can, I felt my first high on alcohol. And what I was expecting that day was I was expecting like a river of laughter to come pouring out of me. Friends and family were going to show up, and we were going to have a big party. That's not what happened. What ended up happening was my chin hit my chest, and I stared at my tennis shoes for a little while. And I thought, wow, this is pretty good stuff. Because what I found that day from alcohol was total, absolute relief. Shoulders came down, the world stopped, the pressure was off. You see, I'm the first of 3 boys brought up in an old traditional Japanese family. And I don't know how many of you are number ones in your family, but being number one in our family, my parents made it very, very clear to me that I was to be better than you. And to tell you the truth, it wasn't that hard. So when that first drink came, the expectations, the performance, everything was just... And I chased that high until I got here. I didn't seriously start drinking until I got into high school. High school, I ran into a real big problem, and that problem was me, Chris. I did not like who I was, and you know what? I was not becoming the man I thought I should be. My perception of a man, 6'2", blonde hair, blue eyes, out there kicking butt all the time and screwing all the girls. That's a man. I wake up in the morning, look in the mirror, and I see this short, pimple-faced Japanese kid, and I need a drink. And at that time, I'm drinking Southern Comfort. I got a half pint in my locker, and I got a fifth in the car. Break time comes, I cruise on over to that locker, poke my head in there, grab that half pint, take the top off, and stand in front of that locker, and I tip that bottle back once, twice. And I stand in front of that locker and I swallow. That warm, sweet, burning sensation's going down, and the magic happens. Starts at the tip of my toes, comes up my spine, grabs me by the back of the head, and now I'm ready for creative writing. And I fall in love with alcohol because alcohol works. And I know exactly how much I need. 2 hits off of that bottle. That's it. After school, get out of school, jump in the car, grab that fifth, boom. Same exact feeling. And I absolutely love alcohol. You know, I got introduced to marijuana. I know this is but I got introduced to marijuana in my junior year. So, but I only smoke it on the weekends because I don't want to get addicted to it, right? So during the day, during the weekdays, I'm drinking, my Southern Comfort, and on the weekends, hanging out with all my buddies, we're drinking, we're smoking a little grass, we're going to Jack in the Box, and oh my God, I'm living large. I'm having the absolute best time of my life. High school is so easy, right? Everything is fine, it's beautiful, and then I get out of high school, I'm on my way to college, and I find out another thing about myself at that time. School, I'm good at it, but I don't like it. And this whole talk of college sounds like a huge time commitment. You know, a commitment I'm just not willing to make because I'm just having too much fun. And I'm thinking, you know, can't we just do my senior year over one more time? And that's what I fall into. And, you know, like I said, you know, in our house, education is a big, big thing. And for me not to go to college was like, whew, a huge disappointment. Huge disappointment. And I had to carry that, right? And, you know, what ended up happening was, you know, a bunch of my buddies and I, we were all sitting around drinking and, you know, getting loaded one weekend, and we're all in the same boat. And we come up with this great idea. You know what? Why don't we all go on down to Santa Monica Junior College, the local JC, right? And I thought, wow, that is a great idea. You know, so I went on over there the following week and I signed up for their 8-year program. And you know, I'm not about to put down, you know, junior colleges or anything. I mean, it was a great educational institution. I just didn't want it. And what ended up happening was, you know, I learned a few things in Santa Monica Junior College, and, you know, I learned to hang out at the cafeteria. I learned how to start smoking cigarettes, start drinking coffee, start taking these little white pills to help me concentrate. And before you know it, you know, the disease of alcoholism is just creeping up on me, but I don't even see it coming. Because the way I measure myself is, as long as I'm able to perform, it's okay. So the whole thing is, you know, things just started coming along and everything is fine and dandy. And then all of a sudden, in my chemistry class, I ran into these two older women. And for some strange reason, you know what, the three of us started hanging around together. And they started spending money on me. They started spending, you know, money buying me nice clothes, dressing me all up. We're going to clubs, we're going to parties, we're going to nice restaurants, and we're going to these, you know, parties in these big houses in the hills. And you know, and at that time, you got to remember, I was just some punk teenage kid, and here I was hanging out with the fast crowd, right? And I fell in love with that lifestyle. I loved the action, the speed, this, oh God, I just loved it. You know, and disco was hot. Oh, what a way to go, right? And what ended up happening was, you know, we were at a party one night, and I got introduced to cocaine. And I got to be totally honest with you. You know what? If I could still snort a half a gram of coke, have a couple double Greyhounds, quit, call it a night, go home, wake up tomorrow morning, and not wonder where my next drink or my next drug was coming from, you would have a different speaker here tonight. Somewhere in my alcoholic career, I passed that so-called invisible line. And what that meant for me was that I lost the ability to say no thank you. Because up until that point, you know, I could have a couple of drinks, do a little drug, and, you know, people would hang out, and I could stop, and it didn't bother me. But once I passed that line, if I took something, smoked something, drink something, snort anything, the game was on. And I didn't even know it started. And my life started to unravel just a little bit, because 2 days after I tried cocaine, I was selling it. And my entrepreneurial career took off. And, you know, I don't have to tell anybody here, you know, that whole lifestyle just sucked me in. You know, the money, the drugs, the cars, the girls, the clubs, the whole lifestyle was just so intoxicating. I fell in love with it, and I just couldn't get enough of it. And, you know, being in LA, I mean, that was the thing to do. And But just like any good drug dealer story, you know what? I just started doing more than I was selling. And then in that business, it's not a good trademark. And before you know it, the cracks started to show. And that's when I started to come to Alcoholics Anonymous. Because, I'm a smart guy, and I knew something was wrong, but I just couldn't quite put my finger on it. And that's when I started coming here, right? And I saw people like you, and I would judge you, and I would say, oh, I'm not like you because I'm too smart, I'm too good looking, I'm too this, I'm too that, yada. You name it, I came up with all the excuses. You gave me a big book. I took the big book home. I read the book. I study the book. I highlight the book. I'm one of those, right? And you know what? You want to talk about Bill and Bob? I could talk to you about Bill and Bob. You want to talk about the steps? I could talk to you about the steps. You want to talk about the jaywalker? I'll tell you exactly why the jaywalker does what he does. The only problem was I was only talking about it. You people were doing it. Come to find out, there's a big, big difference. The knowledge I had about Alcoholics Anonymous, fabulous. Fabulous. I just couldn't do any of it. And then I started to watch you. And that was when I saw a couple of people. And, back then, if you do the numbers, I got sober when I was 25. And back, 25, when I was 25, that was the so-called young people. We were the young people at the time. And I remember going to this one big meeting on Sunday evening, and there was this one Venice hoodlum. Everybody knew who he was, right? Because he was a troublemaker, bad troublemaker. And here he was, sitting down, sober, carrying a box of books, literature. And I was like, oh my God, what happened to you? Right? This is one of the guys that ran the street. You just did not want to be on the wrong side of him. And here he was carrying a box of books. It's like, oh. But the thing was, every time I came back, he was still there carrying that box of books. And I almost thought to myself, oh my God, you know what? If a guy like that can do it, maybe I have a chance. What ended up happening was, like I said, the drugs, the alcohol, everything just started to consume me little by little. And man, before I knew it, lying, cheating, stealing, those kind of things went out the door way, way long ago. Now I start to do things that I don't want to talk about, but I got to do it because I got to drink and use. And you know what? I'd love to always tell people, I wish I was, telling some huge drug dealer story where I was like Miami Vice and, selling kilos of, no. The kind of alcoholic that you're looking at is I'm the kind of alcoholic, I'm crawling around my mom's bedroom at 2:30 in the morning and I'm trying to get at her purse because I'm on a run and I need another 20. And by this time, my mom, she sleeps with her purse under her pillow. That's the kind of pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization that, like I said, I've been sober 36 years. Every time I tell that story, I could just feel the carpet. And that feeling I never, ever want to forget. Because those are the things that remind me, you know what, I don't ever want to do that again. And the last, 6-8 months of my drinking and using career, if I drink something, smoke something, snort something, anything, bam, I'm on the ground and I'm ODing. Now paramedics are starting to come pick me up. I'm waking up in emergency rooms, strapped down on the gurney with hoses coming in and out of my arms. And I'm thinking to myself, you know what? What's a smart good-looking guy like me doing in a place like this? And I can't figure it out. One day I came to in the back of an ambulance, strapped down one more time with hoses coming in and out of my arms. And as I came to, the paramedic was leaning over me, and I see his name tag, Tom, T-O-M. And the paramedic says, "You know what, kid? One of these days, you're not going to wake up." That same paramedic had picked me up 7 days earlier, and my life was just running out my sleeves. I couldn't even tap the brakes, and it was just going down fast. And like I said, by this time, I'd been in and out of AA almost 5 years, and I had no idea what to do. And I'd love to tell you, you know what, I got sober that day, getting out of that paramedic's care, but no, I had to go a little longer. Because you know what, I am of the variety that I just got to go all the way to the edge and push it just a little bit more. What ended up happening was, May 20th, 1987, I woke up stark naked one more time in another cockroach-infested motel. And as I peeled myself off of the floor and I just sat there, there's that moment where God gave me just enough grace, just enough willingness to say, you know what, I'll take the hand of God. Because his hand was always out there for me. I just didn't take it. And that morning, I reached out and I grabbed his hand and he said, "Come with me." And I went with him that morning. And what that meant was I surrendered myself to you, Alcoholics Anonymous. I checked myself into a rehab program, spent 28 days there. Turn right, I turn right, turn left, I turn left, jump how high. I did everything. And I'll tell you, when I was going in and out, I had this so-called sponsor, the big sponsor word, right? I had this old guy, I swear to God, he couldn't keep me sober if his life depended on it, And when I gave up and I surrendered, that old man turned into a pillar of sobriety for me. And he started telling me certain things to do. And, here I am, I'm in rehab and now I'm, sleeping, getting 3 meals, I'm working out, going to meetings, I pick up like 10 or 15 pounds, I'm ready to go, right? And I said, yeah, let's go. I want to get the book and I'm going to jump into the steps. And he grabbed that book away from me. He says, "I don't want you to read the book." I thought, whoa. He says, "Guys like you don't need to know the book. Guys like you need to know how to live the book." And he started to show me how to live my life based on the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. And what that meant was, he wanted me to go to a meeting every single day. All right, that's pretty easy. Now he wanted me to get these so-called commitments. I was like, okay, how many? Right? Because now the negotiation starts a little bit. And we meet at the big Saturday night meeting, right? The big speaker meeting. And we get there a little early, we're chit-chatting, and he says, "Hey, Chris," he says, "you get any of those commitments I asked you to get?" And I say, "Well, that's newcomer talk for no." And man, he was not happy. He was not happy about that. And he says, "You know what, Chris, this is what I want you to do." He says, "I want you to come here next Saturday early." He says, "I want you to help all these people set up these chairs." I was like, "Ooh, man, this is a big meeting. There's a lot of chairs." You know what? Okay. So the following Saturday, right, I get there early, help the setup crew set up all these chairs, and my sponsor gets there a little early. He's checking up on me, right? And I catch him out of the corner of my eye. I grab another 2 or 3 chairs. I'm sweating, and I'm putting the chairs up, and because what I want is I want him to tell me, you know what, Chris, attaboy, right? And Spons, hey, how you doing, right? I'm setting up these chairs, He's like, oh, Chris, he puts his arm around my shoulder and he says, Chris, you're doing a good job. And he starts taking me to the front door. And he plants me at the front door and he says, this is what I want you to do now. He says, I want you to shake everybody's hand that comes through that door. I was like, whoa, hold on a minute. That's like 2 commitments at one meeting. I was like, is this legal? And he says, now this is what I want you to say. He says, I want you to shake everybody's hand that comes through that door and say, hi, I'm Chris and I'm alcoholic. I said, everybody? Everybody. Whew. Okay. Hi, I'm Chris, I'm alcoholic. 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 By the 3rd or the 4th month, you're looking at me like, you know what? We know you're Chris, you're alcoholic. And the funniest thing started to happen. I started to remember some of your names. Not that I cared, but I started to remember. And we started to have these conversations, these deep, worldly conversations at the front door. You would say something like, hey, Chris, how was your week? Whew, man, you're talking to somebody with just under 60 days of sobriety. And I'm like, I have no idea how my week was. The only thing I can tell you is that I didn't drink or use this week. And you said, Chris, that's enough. And my life started to really move forward. And what ended up happening was, all these principles that I was taught here, home group, commitments, like this first speaker was talking about, that discipline, that consistency, I was taught here. And thank God, being a member of the Pacific Group, I was taught that diligence. And here's the secret for all of you maybe who are new or anything else. The things that we do here in Alcoholics Anonymous, you could take that out there into the real world. And you know what? It works just as good, if not better, because they don't know. And my life exploded. My being sober, being member of a great home group, being committed to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I started taking these principles out into the business world. And before you know it, my business just exploded. 1 company, 2 companies, 3 companies, 100, 200, 300 people on payroll. It just became like, and I'm cars, money, property. It's just coming at me, traveling all over the world, doing everything, cutting deals, and, just the life that I've always wanted, but now sober. Here I was sober doing it. I'm walking around Alcoholics Anonymous, because, and I become a legend in my own mind. Because, I continue to go to meetings, I'm sponsoring guys, I got commitments, and, now they want me to be the treasurer, now they want me to be the secretary, which meeting am I going to be secretary? And before you know it, it just, and I don't even see it coming. Stone cold sober, the disease of alcoholism lives right up here. And I don't know when it happened, but somewhere in my sober career, I just kind of came off of the rails just a little bit. Just a little bit. But 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years later, I'm way over here. and you guys are way over here, and I don't even know it. And the thing is, here I am. I always like to say that, that I was born and raised Buddhist, right? And, being born and raised Buddhist in Los Angeles, everybody wants to be Buddhist, right? So here I am. I'm like, you know what? Take it easy there. I got a head start in this whole spirituality thing. So I thought, I'm deeply Zen. Deeply Zen. And, I've got I got a pretty damn nice resume to show, right? So I have this list. I'm sober. I got a great sponsor. I sponsor a bunch of guys. I go to meetings. Me and God, we're like this because you know what? As long as God keeps giving me all that stuff, oh my God, I love Him. God and I are best friends. And the simple fact of the matter is, you know what? For whatever reason, it kept coming, and it kept coming. And as things were progressing, what ended up happening was, as my life was progressing and all of these things were coming together, I was 30 years sober. 30 years sober. Active member of Alcoholics Anonymous. Legend in my own mind. And here I was out in Chicago on a business trip. And I came home, and my wife of 25 years left me. Cleared out the bank account, took all the cars, the watches, the jewelry, the cash. She even took the dog. And she left. But me being Mr. AA and Mr., I'm thinking, you know what? No need to worry. What woman in their right mind would leave a guy like me, right? Then the letters from her attorney started coming. Ooh, man. I was like, she's serious about this, right? She's not coming back. And that scared the hell out of me. Because now I go back to my old tool chest, right? And the only way I know how to solve problems really is I just go to a bunch of meetings and I'm just doing the activities of Alcoholics Anonymous. But I have no depth here. And I start to slip into a depression because I have nothing to manage these kinds of life problems. And life is coming at me hard and fast. And the things that I throw at it, I throw money at it, I throw power, I throw control, I throw everything I got at it, and it doesn't even phase the problem. And I start to really slip into a depression quick and fast and hard, and I can't get out of it. I'm talking to my sponsor every single day. All my AA brothers are calling me. Everybody's doing whatever they can to help move me along. But you know what? I don't know where to go because I'm by myself, just in myself. And what ended up happening was, one Friday morning, I came to, and the disease of alcoholism was screaming at me. And I jumped out of that bed, and I ran around that bedroom, in this big house by myself, and I was going crazy. And I had no solution, and I was just running around, physically just running around. I was scared that morning. And then, bam, it hit me. You know what, Chris? You're not going to drink and use with 30 years of sobriety. But you know what? Why don't you just hang yourself? And pow, there was the answer. The relief I always look for. And it was just like, whew, there's the answer. Long story short, what ended up happening was, a good friend of mine, he called the police on me. And the police show up at my office. And, I walk out there and I'm thinking, oh my God, what's going on here, right? And I walk out and the cops take me out into the parking lot and they go, you know what, Chris? They go, a friend of yours called and said that you may hurt yourself. So me being the good AA, I tell them the truth. I tell them, well, yeah, I'm planning on hanging myself in the warehouse tomorrow. I didn't know that you don't tell them that. Right? I didn't know. And the next thing I know, I'm handcuffed in the back of a squad car. I got thrown into a lockdown psych ward on a 72-hour suicide hold. Oh my God, I could look back and laugh at it now, but oh boy. I don't know about you, but you know what? I've been to thousands of meetings in my 36 years, right? And I've heard your stories about being locked up in the psych ward, the mental institution or whatever, but you know what? I gotta tell you, it's a little different when you're sitting in the TV room with 30 years of sobriety. And man, that is a humbling experience, right? And so, one of my AA brothers, Sean, he came and he brought me a big book. And I'm sitting in the TV room reading the big book. And, there's a couple other people just like you and me sitting around in the TV room, reading the big book. And one guy across the way, he looks up at me, he goes, hey, how long have you been sober? I was like, 30 years. He goes, 30 days. I've got 14 days. I go, no, not 30 days. 30 years. And his eyes just pop out of his head like he'd just seen Jesus or something, right? And he looks at me and he says, what the hell are you doing here? And you know what? Only thing I could tell him was, I don't know. I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. I was totally lost. And I got out of that psych ward, and I will tell you, having never experienced anything like that, I'll be the first to tell you, I used to judge. Sometimes when people say, I'm bipolar or all this kind of other stuff, this mental health issues, having actually seen crazy and alcoholic, there's a big difference. There's a big difference. I know where I sit, and I'm grateful that I know that, and that I have a place to come, you, to help me. But when I got out of that facility, man, I was pissed off. I was pissed off at all of you, at God, everybody, everything, because you know what? You people were screwing me, selling me this BS about, go to meetings and help newcomers and do all this other thing. You know what? I knew you people were just setting me up. That's what you were doing, setting me up. And then right when you got me, you just pulled the rug right out from under me. And I was mad. I was going to meetings, getting in arguments with all the old timers, telling them, you know what, we got to tell the new people this is just BS, because eventually we're just going to screw them, all of them, right? And this God thing is just screw this God. Oh my God, I was just on a rant for months, and thank God, once again, all of you, you know what? You never kicked me out. You kept me away from the new people. But you didn't kick me out. And you just let me rant and rave and just pissed off. And the funny thing is, this is the sick thing about Alcoholics Anonymous. The more I was pissed, the more you asked me to speak. And I was like, God dang. So I'm going everywhere and I'm speaking and I'm just pissed off. And one night I was invited to this one big Thursday night meeting out in Pasadena, and that was just one of the legendary nights where I was just on fire, just giving it all to you, right? And at this meeting, they had all the old timers sitting right here in the front, right here. And I just let them have it. And you should have seen all the old timers are like, right? All the new people in the back were like, yeah, you tell them. And oh my God, I just gave it to them. And then after the meeting, everybody's, coming up to thank me. And then the very last woman, never met her, never seen her since. She comes up to me and she says, you know what, Chris? She says, can I have your mailing address? My mailing address? I've given out my phone number thousands of times, but never my mailing address. Oh, what the hell? Give it to her, right? I give her my mailing address and she says, I'm going to send you a couple of books. She says, if you find them interesting, read them. If not, she says, just throw them away or donate them. I was like, oh, okay. Sure enough, 2 days later, Amazon shows up. 2 books. One was called Spiritual Emergency, and the other one was Dark Night of the Soul, St. John of the Cross. And I read those books. The Spiritual Emergency book, you know what? It described me to a T as a human being. Who I was and, the way I think and all these character defects that I have. And it was a hard book to really look at and go, ooh, there I am. I don't like it, but there I am. And so that encouraged me to start reading the second book. The second book was The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross. And I'm Buddhist, right? And I'm going to read some book about some monk in Spain in the 15th century. What the hell do they know? Jesus, And I started to read the book. And bam, there I was. This guy was describing to me exactly who I was, what I was doing, how I was feeling, and what was going to happen next. I was like, wow, if this actually happens, I could be in for a lot of trouble. And so I started to read it, and I started to read it in depth. And at that time, I started to date this girl in my group, and she introduced me to the church. And like I said, being Buddhist, the only time I've ever been to Catholic church, funerals, baptism, or a wedding. Those were it. And now she starts inviting me to go to Mass. I'm like, ooh, wow, I don't know about this stuff, right? Because, you people are standing, you're kneeling, you're doing all this kind of stuff, and I don't have the knowledge of what's going on. And we start going because, for whatever reason, she's pretty hot, so I'm telling you the truth, right? Whatever gets you there, gets you there. That got me there. So, I'm chasing her all the way to church, and, everything is, and I started to listen to the priest, give the homily. and talk about the Bible and the gospel. And I'm a smart guy, and I know surface areas of this so-called religious stuff, but I don't know the depth and the meaning of this kind of stuff. And the priest starts to break it all down. And I go, really? Is that what that means? I never knew. And I start to get drawn into it little by little, just like AA. And I told my sponsor, Tom, I go, hey, Tom, you know what? I'm going to start to go to church. He says, that's great, Chris. I want you to go. But he says, remember one thing only. He says, always keep Alcoholics Anonymous first. Because without AA, that church is going to be useless. 2 different programs, period. Same God, different. And what ended up happening was, about a year or 2 into this whole thing of just going there regularly, I started to pick up on it, and a year and a half later, I got baptized and I converted to Catholicism. And you know what? I'm not here to, push the religious thing or anything, but this is what it took for an alcoholic like me, 30 years sober, to hit the wall and go, you know what? Uh-oh. I used to think, you know what? If you're over 20 years sober, there's no way you would drink and use again. I know why people with long-term sobriety go out. I know why they blow their brains out. I know why they hang themselves. You're talking to one. I was just very, very blessed that for whatever reason, God didn't want me at that time. And he says, you know what? You're not done yet. You need to go do some more work. So here I am. And just like I said, the big difference between the 2 programs hit me when, just like in Alcoholics Anonymous, I jumped into church, I'm active, I'm going, I'm volunteering, I'm taking up, commitments, just like we do here. Exact same thing. And this is during COVID. So I'm at Bible study, right, on a Friday night on Zoom. And there's about 25, 30 people, on the screen. And there's a priest there, and we read through the Bible, and the priest would say, so Sally, what caught your attention in that reading? And Sally would say something really deep, really spiritual, and I'm like, wow, I didn't read that, but John, what are your feelings about that reading? And John would go into it and just give some dissertation. I was like, wow, I didn't get that either. And then he says, so Chris, he says, what did you hear in those readings? I don't know. So I gave him a quick little 5-minute AA talk. Right? And I'm done. And I look at the monitor and I see like 25 faces just all. And it hits me. I go, oh my God, I'm not in AA, I'm in church, right? These people don't get it. They don't understand. The only place in the world that I have found where you take one alcoholic and just say the deepest, darkest secrets, and there will be another alcoholic on the other side, not judging you, not laughing at you, but knows exactly what you're talking about and how you feel and what it will take to make it better. And by going through these steps, little by little, I started to get better. The one step that I will tell you that was the one that broke everything open was the 9th step for me. And it was, like I was telling you, my mom, my parents, hardworking, You know, there was no beating going on in our house. My uncle wasn't molesting me or nothing. I mean, our house was solid house. And I was just tearing my mom apart, you know, because I'm the number one boy and I was just destroying the family name. We were the one that everybody pointed to and said, stay away from that family, you know, because of me. And my mom, you know, had to go to the community center with shame because here she was the mother of that one. And so I was hanging out with my sponsor one day, and we were going to a meeting, and I was coming up on my second AA birthday. And Mother's Day was coming up Sunday. And my sponsor stops and he looks at me and he says, "Hey, Chris," he says, "this Sunday's Mother's Day." I go, "Yeah, so?" He says, "I think this would be a perfect opportunity for you to make amends to your mom." I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. This is a deep amends. I think I need to be at least 5 years sober to make an amends of that magnitude. He says, no. He says, "We'll be making the amends this Sunday." I love the plural that sponsors use. You know, no, I'm got work to do. All right, what do you want me to do? He says, "You know what? I want you to go out and buy the biggest Mother's Day card you can find." He says, "I want you to meet me at the Friday night meeting, and we'll go through it." Go out, buy this big Mother's Day card. And I meet my sponsor at the big Friday night meeting, and great meeting. After the meeting, you know, it was held in this coffee shop, so there was a closed section of the coffee shop, and we go on into this closed section, and he sits in the booth, you know, on one side, I sit on the other side, and he says, "You got the card?" I go, "Yeah, I got the card." He looks at the card, he says, "This is a great card." He says, "Why don't we say a prayer before we get started?" I said, "It's all right. You know, it's your show. I don't care." And the next thing I know, you know, he reaches over and he grabs my hands and he starts to say a prayer. Something like, you know, "Dear God, help Chris to be honest," or something, "to better do thy will," or something like that. I'm like, whoa, you know what? He said, "Amen." My hands came off of that table. I was looking around thinking, man, I hope nobody saw me holding hands with the guy, right? And so he started to ask me a series of questions about my relationship with my mom. And I would tell him the answer. He says, "That's good. Write it down." I wrote it down. And next question. "That's good. Write that down. Write that down. Write this down." And in about 45 minutes, you know, I got like a page and a half of stuff about my relationship with my mom. And he says, "Then this is what I want you to do." He says, "I want you to take the card, write a letter with all the things that you just wrote down right now, keeping in mind two things. Saying, you know, asking for forgiveness from your mom for being such a butthole. And, you know, thanking her for putting up with you." I was like, okay, that's it? That's it. So I went home. And Saturday afternoon, I wrote this letter. I call my sponsor. I read him the letter. He says, "Chris, that is a great letter. Now write it in the card. Go to your mom's house Sunday morning. Give her the card." See, it takes 1, 2, 3. You see the way I have to be taught? Sunday morning comes. I go on over to my mom's house. "Hey, Mom, happy Mother's Day." I give her the card. You know, she sits on the floor Japanese style, and I sit on the couch, and I'm trying to look a little cool, you know, and she opens up the card, and she starts to read the card. And the next thing you know, tears are just pouring down her face. And you could just hear the tears hitting the card, you know, just like pop, pop. And the next thing I know, you know, I'm sitting there, I'm bawling, and, you know, my mom gets up, and I get up, and she comes over, and she hugs me for the first time, right? And she tells me that she loves me. And, you know, just another precious, precious moment that I could have missed, right? I knew that there is a God and that He loves me. And that as long as I keep coming here, hanging out with people like you, I've got a chance, one more chance to stay sober one more day. I'm grateful. Thank you very much.